Welcome to the Savvy Dentist Podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hello everyone, it's Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist Podcast. It is great to have you here for another episode. And in this short episode, I wanted to talk about hiring team members. And in particular, I wanted to share a couple of tips and a couple of thoughts that I hope will help you attract the best possible team members for your practice. Now, of course, we understand that the labour market at the present time is quite tight. We're seeing in Australia, at least, the borders still closed. We're seeing overseas people not being able to come in. We're seeing people compete for talent in ways that we've not seen for a while. So we also need to understand, though, that our ability to grow our practice is going to be directly influenced by our ability to grow and lead a team. So with that in mind, we need to be able to have an HR system that is able to attract great people to the practice, to train those people up so they become really proficient. We want to be able to retain those good people, of course, and we need to be able to do that systematically, proficiently, and repeatedly so that we can do that time and time again. So I guess the first thing I wanted to share with you around this is a bit of a mindset. And the mindset is really that we are in the marketing business, but we're marketing for talent. Obviously, we're really familiar with marketing for patients. We know about marketing for patients to fill our appointment book, but it's the same principle that we want to apply to marketing for talent. And you would have heard me talk about the 3 M's of marketing before. We've spoken about the market, the message, and the medium. And we're simply applying the exact same process to talent recruitment as we would to trying to attract new patients to the business. So let's start with the market. Who is our ideal applicant avatar? Who are we trying to attract? Now, when we go through this for marketing for patients, we talk about who that avatar is, what their hopes and frustrations are, and so on and so forth. And it's the same process. If we're trying to attract a receptionist or a DA or an associate dentist, we want to get really clear about who we're trying to attract, because we're going to craft a message that speaks to that person. And if we're going to craft a message that speaks to that person, we need to understand the conversation that's already going on inside their head. So to understand that conversation, we need to know what their hopes and aspirations are for this role. If they were to come and work for us, what do they want out of the role? What are they trying to achieve? What are the things that are really important to them? And equally, what are the bad experiences or the frustrations or the fears they might be experiencing based on past experience or scuttlebutt in the marketplace or things their friends tell them? So we've got to be really clear about that, because once we understand that, we can create a compelling ad that speaks to those particular points. And that is going to be really, really key. We want an ad that people pay attention to. We want an ad that stands out. And we want an ad that attracts the right type of people. It's a bit like going fishing. If you're trying to catch a tuna fish, you're going to want to have the right bait that a tuna fish is attracted to. And the right ad is going to be our bait. And to get that ad right, we need to know what our applicant likes, what they don't like. So the second thing that's really important to understand is our own employer value proposition. And it's a really important document that I believe that every practice should have, and that is, why should someone come and work with you? What is it about your practice that's good? What is it about your practice that's unique? And what do your team members say that they like about working in your practice now? And so I believe that you should have a document in your files, part of your intellectual property assets, which clearly articulates your employer value proposition. Maybe it's about your culture. Maybe it's about your values. Maybe it's about your location. Maybe it's about the ability to have great work-life balance. Whatever it happens to be, why should someone want to come and work with you? And we've got to remember that as much as applicants are trying to sell themselves to us, it's a mutual thing. We're trying to attract them as well. And so we've got to be clear about what it is that we do well and craft that into an employer value proposition. So the third thing that we really need to get clear about is an ad. It's not all about what they must be. And so I see lots of ads, not just in dentistry, but in general, when I go through a different Seek or Indeed or whatever platform you look at. And the ad is almost like a list of demands. You must do this. You must do that. You must. And it sounds, well, quite frankly, it sounds a little bit dictatorial. It sounds a little bit like, oh my God, I've got to jump through all these hoops. And of course, we want an ad that is not all about that. We want an ad that is balanced. Yes, of course, we want them to know what they need to be able to do, but we also need to be able to convey in that ad what's in it for them, what's attractive. And it's got to be more than just above award remuneration. That kind of thing is not so attractive. So we've got to be able to have a creative ad, and a creative ad begins with a headline. So we've got to create a headline that captures people's attention, because the headline's only job is to encourage the reader to read further. And that's what we're really looking to do. So we've got to be able to have that ad that encourages people to read further, and that ad must be more than just a list of demands from our end. It's got to be something that's compelling and interesting for them, enough for them to want to apply and submit the application. So I think that's going to be key there for you as well. Now, point number 4 is we want to have a screening process. Of course, we've all had those applicants come in where I think people are ticking a box for some reason or another, and perhaps they're not that committed to the role, but they have to apply. Or indeed, some people apply for roles that they're not really qualified for. Whatever the reason, we've got to be able to screen people so that we're getting the ability to shortlist some of the applicants there. Now, you could screen in a number of different ways. You could screen by giving them some instructions to follow, for example. Maybe you can ask them to write a short little story about themselves and tell a bit about your background. Maybe, I know some people get people to do a video, and so on and so forth. But whatever it is, you want to make sure that they can follow the instruction in the advertisement, and that it's a valuable screening process. And we're not trying to make them jump through a hoop just for the sake of it, but we want to make sure that we've got people that can follow the instructions in the ad, and that the instructions that they do follow actually add value in helping us understand that person, helping us know more about them, so that when it comes to the interview process, we're going into that interview knowing more about the applicant that we're sitting across the table from, or across the Zoom screen from. So, screening process, really, really important. Of course, we need to have some form of marking rubric to see who gets an interview. So what do I mean by a marking rubric? Well, I guess it's a standardized assessment form so that we are comparing apples and apples. Each applicant is assessed according to our scoring system so that we can see which ones are going to get an interview and which ones are not. And those ones that are not, we're going to be able to send a very nice and a very gracious "you were not successful in this process" letter or email or whatever. But in any event, we need to have a system for assessing the different applicants. And I've got teenage kids, and they do their assignments at school, and they get given a marking rubric. And, it's really, really important, from the kids' point of view. I say to them, look, when you're doing your assignment, make sure you give the teachers what they're looking for. Make sure that you hit all these points in your assignment so you're going to get scored the best possible score. Now, we're not necessarily going to hand out the marking rubric to the applicants, of course, but you can weave some of those elements into your criteria within your ad. But then we're going to assess the different applicants that come through against a standardized set of criteria so that it's fair across the board. We're not going off gut feel, or we're not going off intuition or vague recommendation. We're going to be able to have some sort of process that we're following that's repeatable. And once we've gone through that marking rubric and we've shortlisted, we want to be able to prepare some common interview questions. And some of those questions really, I believe, should be some, questions about getting to know the person, getting to understand their background and a bit about their personal circumstances. But we want to be able to also, as best we can, see how they're going to respond under certain circumstances or certain scenarios. So we get an idea of what drives their behavior, what their values are. And when we're assessing that, we get a bit of an understanding whether that person's going to be a great culture fit for our team or not. And culture fit is going to be key. What we really want to ensure is that we're recruiting people who are great culture fit. If there's a skills gap, we can train that, but it's very, very hard to make up for a culture misfit. And oftentimes those people come into the business, particularly in tight labor markets, we want anyone with a pulse who fogs a mirror sometimes. We get that desperate for recruiting. Hopefully you're not at that stage. But we want to make sure that we're attracting people who are a great culture fit, because one of the things that we know is that if we bring in C players into our practice, or even D players, we run the risk of losing an A player. A players don't want to work with C's or D's. We've got to make sure that we protect our culture, and asking questions that are scenario-based give us an indication, as best as possible at least, around the values that drive that person's decision-making. And of course, values and values alignment is a huge part of cultural fit. So the key thing there. Now, of course, you want to make sure that as you go through this process, when you're interviewing, again, you've got some questions that you're going to ask, you've got some criteria that you're going to check off, and you've got some note-taking implements with you so that you can, again, try and be as systematic across the board as possible. And again, make sure that you're comparing apples with apples. So it's also really important to understand that when you have a good applicant that comes through your door, and you will get great applicants come across your door, we've got to understand that those applicants have many opportunities available to them, particularly in this labour market. So we need to have a framework which is going to allow you to be able to attract those people. And we call that the magnetic job offer in the work that we do. But the magnetic job offer was created when I was working with a dentist who works in regional Victoria, and he was struggling to get an associate to come and work at the practice. And that associate came through the doors, and this particular client said to me, look, they've got a nice CV, they've won these prizes at uni, but that doesn't make them a great dentist. And so what we did, and by the way, he was absolutely correct on that. That doesn't necessarily guarantee that they will be a great dentist, but it does indicate that they're conscientious, and it does indicate that they've tried hard and all those other things. So we created this particular framework called the magnetic job offer for him, where he was able to assess what was important for that particular dentist. He was able to then craft the offer so that it met their needs, and while at the same time articulating his needs to that particular applicant so that she could then see if she was able to fulfill those needs. And as it turned out, they were a great fit for one another, and that associate dentist stayed there for a number of years, and we had a great time there, learned a lot of skills, added value to the practice, and they're still really good friends today. So again, I think that that's a really important thing, is to have that way of doing it. Now, of course, it's hard to understand what the applicant wants and to craft an offer. So again, we've got to do a little bit of background research around that. We've got to do a little bit of assumption and deduction from the CV. If there's proud inclusions in there, awards and so on, we can assume that that's important to them. We can assume they're proud of them. We can assume that they're conscientious, probably. And sometimes those assumptions are valid and sometimes they're not. But again, we would just go into those assumptions, and that applicant would correct us if that's not the case. Equally, sometimes it's useful to do a little bit of social media research as well, see what's important to them. In this particular applicant, nearly every photo was of that person with their family. So we knew that relocating to regional Victoria was going to perhaps create a bit of dislocation. And so we needed to make sure that they had the opportunity to get back to their metro area, to see their family and friends, and to stay connected. And so again, we can make some deductions around that. So again, you've got to do a little bit of research around that as well. So once again, marketing for talent is what we're talking about. It's a recruitment process, and it is marketing the same as we'd market for new patients. We're using the same market, message, and medium process. We've got to make sure that we get that right. And of course, we need to make sure that we've got the ideal applicant avatar. We've got the messaging right in the advert. We've put the ad in the right place. We've got a process for screening, got a process for asking questions, and of course, checking responses against the other applicants as well, standardizing the process. And remembering that good applicants have opportunities aplenty these days. So we've got to be able to pitch to them as much as they pitch to us. So again, you want to have a framework like we've got and create your own there that suits you. And that will be a really good asset for you and your business. So I hope you find those tips really helpful. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Take good care. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon. All right. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessegreen.com/savvydentist.